Welcome to Drinks in the Library, the only library where drinks aren't just allowed, they are required. I'm your librarian host, Gigi Howard, and each episode I'll be interviewing a guest about a much-loved book that we will be pairing with a drink for you to enjoy along with us or consider for your next book club meetup. As always, stay curious and support your local library. Hello, Libration Nation. I am so excited to announce that this week, Richmond Magazine named Drinks in the Library the #2 podcast out of Richmond, Virginia. I just started this podcast this year. It went live in February. So to be named #2, that was just a big, happy surprise for me. And I wanted to thank everyone who voted and for your continued support. And if you like the show, if you want to support the show, just tell someone about it this week. And getting into it, we have a very special episode. We are diving into the timeless world of Judy Blume's Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. And joining me is my fellow librarian, Jess Harshbarger, as we explore the impact of this iconic coming-of-age story, touching on friendship, puberty, identity, and discussing how it's still relevant 50 years after publication. On that note, we do talk a lot about Judy Blume. You cannot talk about Judy Blume without talking about the freedom to read and how often her books have been banned. We discuss the content of these books and what makes them banned, and a lot of that content is coming of age, puberty, sex. And I just wanted to give that disclaimer before you start listening. Our drink this week is a blue GigiRita. So, that's kind of a merger of my favorite drink with the coming of age experience that Jess shares she had growing up. A little about Jess. She is a library manager and has worked in public libraries for the last 18 years. She's a Virginia native, but she's also spent time in Arizona, North Carolina, and Ohio. She's married with 2 children and 3 dogs. Her favorite pastime is listening to live music, and she dreams of competing on a music trivia show one day. In the last 5 years, she's embraced her inner artist, and her style best fits abstract realism. She uses mostly acrylic medium and posts under Whimsical Wallflower on Facebook and Whimsical Wallflower Art on Instagram. All right, let's dive into Judy Blume. Thank you for being here.
Yes. I told you a long time ago that I would once I found the book.
Yeah.
And you did. Spontaneously, was yep, I'll do that book.
Okay. And so what book are we doing?
We are doing Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. And I chose it on a whim right after I listened to your podcast, the one where Bill interviewed you.
Yeah.
Well, she didn't do that book. I can totally do that book. And then as I was preparing, I was like, why would I choose such an iconic... But I think it's going to be great. We obviously both love the book, and lots of other people do too. So I think a lot of people maybe can relate to whatever we may say, which I have no idea what I might say.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of the beauty of it. You also chose the drink.
I did.
So let's talk about what we're drinking today.
So we're drinking a blue GigiRita. So the GigiRita was introduced in your episode as well. And the important part for me was that it included the blue.
The Blue Curaçao.
Yes, the Blue Curaçao.
Yeah.
Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret is a coming-of-age story. And I thought, well, whatever we drink should be a coming-of-age kind of moment as well. And so the blue part is when, not at the same time, but around the same time of reading Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. There was a time where I had a sleepover with a friend, and we were sneaking into the refrigerator, trying to figure out what we might be able to get our hands on. And we found the Blue Curaçao. And of course, not really knowing much about the difference between liquor and liqueur. And we're like, this will work. And we drank it straight, and it was horrible. But then we had a running joke, even now, however many years later, because we're still friends.
Yeah.
We call it 2,000 flushes because it was like blue and thick, and like when you drink it by itself, pretty disgusting. But when you put it in a margarita or a GigiRita, it's amazing.
It is. It is. So try it. So I made it. You haven't tried it yet. And
I have not.
Yeah, I should have asked you if you like salt on the rim, but
I can do. I like my margaritas any which way.
Okay.
I can have salt, no salt, sugar.
I just thought it looked so pretty with the salt and sugar on the rim.
And it's amazing.
Is it good? Okay.
Yes, it's very, very good. So.
Yeah, I mean, you really can't go wrong on a margarita. Because, I love it when you're making a GigiRita. Excuse me, messing up my own drink.
I know. I did it. I was the one that started calling it a margarita. I'm sorry. That was me.
It's okay. I love with a GigiRita is, you're just making it, and you're like, oh, I put too much liquor in it. So you just, put some extra juice in it. And then you're like, oh, too much juice.
You must add some more tequila.
And that's how the night usually ends poorly. No, I'm just kidding.
Sam is very heavy on the tequila usually. Yeah. I'm like, let's dial it back a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. And Sam is your husband. I am so psyched today to talk about this book because I just think it's going to be so much fun. There is probably not a subject that I love more than, Judy Blume.
Judy, again? Choosing someone who has been so influential and a part of so many people's lives for so many years is both great and also a little intimidating because doing her justice, I hope I am able to do her some justice here.
She's easy breezy. She lives down in the Florida Keys. So she lives in Key West. She has a bookstore down there.
Yes, and she's in her 80s and is still running that bookstore. Yeah. I mean, they didn't start running the bookstore until much later in life. She's like, I don't think I can write another book, but I can run a bookstore.
Yeah. I mean, I think she's just one of those people that always has something to do, Right. And I can relate to that. And I respect it,
We're kind of jumping ahead to her, but did you watch the documentary? The 2023 one.
The documentary?
Yeah, Judy Blume Forever. It's on Amazon.
Oh, okay.
And I'm not trying to plug Amazon at all, but that's where you find it.
Otherwise, we hate Amazon.
Don't want anyone to be like, Amazon sucks. They treat people horribly. Why would you recommend them? Yeah. But that's how you can watch the documentary. Yeah, fair. So there you go.
Yeah. No, I didn't. I didn't even know about it.
So I didn't know about it either, but being a librarian and wanting to do my due diligence and preparing for today. Because honestly, I love books, I love reading, and I love authors. Yeah. And I love going to see them and talk about their stories, but I don't actually get into the details of many authors' lives. And so I didn't know that there was a documentary. However, even without this, if I had known, I would totally watch it. It's kind of like Pink is one of my favorite musical artists, and I was all about watching her documentary, So it was really good, though, and I highly recommend it. It made me cry a couple times.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, well, she's so important and to so many people. So who were you?
Who was I?
When you first read Are You There,
So God? I want to give you context. I know your listeners cannot see pictures, but here we go. This was tween age Jess.
Okay, so is this your friend that you were drinking the Blue Curaçao with?
No, that is not. Oh. That is a friend that is one of my only besties that I'm still not in contact with. I have people from middle school on. That was my elementary and somewhat into middle, but I moved in between my 5th grade and 6th grade year. And so that is Yen. And so that was probably my 12th birthday is what I'm thinking that was. So that show, so I was still in that I'm a kid, but I'm not a kid. I'm growing up. I have this, I think that's a Sweet Valley High book that someone gave me, right?
Yeah.
Plus a stuffed animal.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that's where you were. So I don't remember exactly what age I was when I brought my copy, the exact copy that I had. So this is
the original Jess. This was like the 90s
This is the 1986 cover. And I don't know if you looked it up. There have been 23 different covers.
I imagine.
Which is crazy to me because I know that when, they release movies and stuff, they come out with new covers, but 23 different covers. And I see your cover is one of the more recent covers, but mine is the 1986 cover. And the cover that I feel like I've seen a lot, but probably because of people my age, that being the one that they had. It is definitely yellowed, and I can also tell you it's probably one of the few books I still have from my childhood. So I have probably 5 that I actually kept, even though I had hundreds of books, because I ended up really loving the Babysitter's Club, and I had like every single one of those. So I had over 100 of those, and didn't keep those, but I kept my Are You There, God, It's Me, Margaret.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of the Babysitter's Club?
No.
That was this hilarious podcast. It was, there's so many inspirations for why I did this, but there was a podcast that these 2 guys were rereading I don't know if they read the original Babysitters, but they were reading them in their 30s. And I listened to it probably 2017, and it was hilarious. I recommend anybody who wants another podcast to check out is the Babysitter's Club. I loved it. So anyway, you brought that up.
Yes, and Audrey,
your daughter,
my daughter, she really liked the adaptation. I think Netflix, right, that did the TV show, and they really modernized it very well. I think they did a really good job making it feel relevant in the 2020s. Yeah.
And also, there's the new, Babysitter's Little Sister.
Yes.
And it's a graphic novel series. She's very into that.
Adapted the series also into graphic novels.
Yeah.
Which is just great. But Babysitter's Club is when I really became I don't remember struggling with reading, but I feel like I must have, because I don't feel like I enjoyed it so much up until I got into that series. And so I actually credit the Babysitter's Club for being a librarian for my love of books, because I could not get enough of that. But then at the same time of reading things like that and things like Are You There, God, It's Me, Margaret, I was reading things like V.C. Andrews. So my reading kind of was all over the place. The wholesomeness of the Babysitter's Club, the darkness of V.C. Andrews, and then right there in between.
Yeah. Is Are You There, God,
It's Me, Margaret.
Yes. So, okay, that is awesome. And I think a lot of people who are around our age, now closer to Barbara Simon's age, Margaret's mother, they can relate to your journey. And that cover you have with you, I don't think I had that one for Are You There, God, It's Me, Margaret, but I think that must have been a whole Judy Blume series where they did all the covers the same, because I think I've read all of her books, but another important one for me is Just As Long As We're Together, and that was the same kind of cover in that version.
And I'm going to admit that I have not read all her books.
Okay.
The Fudge series never really interested me. Might as an adult read it, because I do read juvenile literature just for my own, which not all adults do or will admit to doing, but I do think that there's definitely some really great juvenile literature that most of what I've read recently has been with my kids, but there are other things that I've read. I try to read some of the Newberries and keep up with that. But Fudge, I just never, at the time, really, it didn't interest me. And I didn't read Wifey, but I read Summer Sisters, and I read In the Unlikely Event as soon as it came out, actually.
Turn around.
Oh, and there it is. It's right there.
I could see it right behind your head. Yeah, I have a copy of it.
And it was really good. It was different than her other stuff. And also, I like historical fiction.
Yeah.
And it was very
good. Yeah. And, I definitely want to get in. We can talk endlessly about all her books. What is Are You There, God, It's Me, Margaret about? If nobody's ever read this story.
So it's what we use the term coming of age, but it really is when a girl, Margaret, who is dealing with some heavy things, because children, as they're going into their teen years, they're dealing with some heavy things. So she has things like puberty on the mind, and she is struggling because her mother was raised as a Christian and her father was raised Jewish, and her parents decided that she could decide when the time was right, what she wanted to be, but they chose not to introduce her to any of it, really. They actually kind of shielded her from it instead. which I actually can relate to that aspect as well. Not exactly the same, but when my grandmother was getting married, she was Southern Baptist and my grandfather was Catholic. So they didn't raise their children as anything either.
Oh.
And so then as a consequence, it wasn't really part of our tradition, I guess, to do anything. Although my grandmother had, once she was separated from my grandfather, started going back to church and was very active in church.
Mm-hmm.
But it was one of those things that it wasn't put on me or expected of me. It was like if I wanted to attend, all I needed to say was, oh, I'm interested. And the only reason I went to church is because my cousin got a new dress when she went. And I was like, well, I want a new dress. So I'll go to church. Uh-huh. So, Nanny, if you're listening, I love you and I love God. But, it was the dress that kind of sucked me in the beginning. There were so many things, though, I could relate to Margaret. I thought of myself as a late bloomer, and which is really funny when I look back at it. I was just an average bloomer. You know what I mean? Everybody felt like that's who they were.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I was short. That might shock you. I'm so tall now.
Yeah.
I was very, very kind of lanky, though. I was very, 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 very skinny.
Similar, and Margaret goes through that as well.
So she's like the second shortest. I probably was the shortest in my class. Mm-hmm. And, just all the fears of the unknown. Like, when will I develop? When will I get my period? All of those things. I'm not going to lie. I did the little chant,
Okay.
It did not work.
Okay, so now you brought up the chant. In the story, Margaret has 3 friends, and they form a group called the Preteen Sensations.
Yes.
And they meet on Mondays, and every Monday they do these chants. Do you want to do the chant?
We can do the chant. We should probably explain that this particular group has a very vocal and pushy leader.
Nancy Wheeler.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So it really is her chant. And she lets them know that they will develop if they do this chant.
Yeah.
At least 35 times? Yes. But the first time they do it together, they do like 50,
Just so for the listeners, imagine you have a 12-year-old daughter or whatever, and she has her friends over, and you're like listening in the door, and this is what you hear them do. We must increase our bust.
And there you go.
Just chanting it over and over.
And they called it their exercises, and they were supposed to, do those in between meetings. And Nancy guaranteed you do those exercises.
Yes.
And I knew that wasn't going to work, but it can't hurt.
I was thinking about it today. So talking about Nancy, she is to me is so symbolic of all preteen angst.
Yes.
Everything that she puts on Margaret. I don't even know if she was maybe a little worried about her growth or her period and everything. Then she meets Nancy, and all of a sudden all the insecurities.
She's got big ears that stick out.
Yeah.
You don't quite fit into my swimsuit.
Yeah, right off the bat. Well, you're pretty small.
At the time of reading it, I don't really think I identified Nancy as being what I would consider now as toxic as she is.
Yeah.
Because, when you're that age, you don't recognize that. I thankfully didn't have a Nancy Wheeler, really, in my friend group.
Yeah.
I would say my friends were all very much supportive and not comparing and competing.
Yeah.
And none of my friends were you can't be my friend if you wear socks and don't wear a bra.
Yeah.
The stipulations are a little harsh.
Yeah. Which is a plot point of Nancy Wheeler insists on those 2 things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you want to be in my club,
if you want to be a preteen sensation, here are the requirements.
Exactly. These rules. And you have to keep a boy diary, which we did.
Oh,
you did? Have friends.
Okay.
We did. We had our list, and we would rate them on looks and personality.
Oh, that's... Can you imagine?
And I probably still have those lists.
Well, and so going to the boy thing too, another thing I thought interesting. So they all was it Philip Leroy is
but he was a jerk.
Yeah, he was a jerk. And I don't think, and that also is another thing to me. I think it's Judy Blume is so amazing in how she can tune in and bring out things that are true for that age of, like, I definitely remember if you had a crush on a boy, but he wasn't popular and he wasn't the right boy, you just weren't allowed. Like, you, or maybe not allowed, but you were embarrassed by it, I think.
Right.
And I mean, I remember that all through high school. And I even remember certain people who everybody universally were like, oh, they're the most beautiful girl in school or whatever. And this friend of mine was a guy, he was like, I just don't get it.
Right? You're like, everyone else thinks that they're attractive, so they are.
Yeah. Because Margaret's true love was Moose.
Moose. The grass cutter Moose.
Yeah, so Moose is the guy that cuts their grass. So Margaret, talk us through Margaret. Another plot point is her moving from New York City to New Jersey.
She moves from the city. Now, in this book, they weren't going to junior high yet. In Virginia, elementary was through 5th grade, and then you went into middle school, which was 6th, 7th, and 8th.
Yeah.
Same
in North Carolina.
So I moved in between my 5th and 6th grade year. I didn't move out of state or anything, but I did change schools in between going from elementary into middle school. So I could relate to that as well, like new friends.
Yeah.
But she moves from New York, from the city into the suburbs, and her grandmother,
Sylvie,
yes, had been in a very important part of her life.
And it's important. So the grandmother is her dad's mom, and so that's the Jewish side of the family.
Yes. The other side, her other grandparents, when her mother chose her father, basically disowned her. He didn't, banished her because he was Jewish. And they hadn't talked in
14 years.
Is that long?
Yeah. So, but at this point, Margaret's grown up with his parents. They're like, we got to get out of New York City. We're going to go to the suburbs.
Yes.
And Margaret's trying to figure out why they're moving. And her only way she can figure out, she thinks it's because to get away from her grandmother.
Yes.
Because her grandmother is so involved in her life. And there's no way that she would ever... She can't travel because she thinks all trains and buses are dirty. And anyway, but she does... Sylvie finds her way to New Jersey.
She does. She clearly cares a whole lot. Margaret's very important to her, and they have a very special relationship.
Yeah, they definitely do. So the book is talking a lot about religion.
Yes. So her mother and father, again, they were from different faiths, and it was up to her to choose when, I forgot how they phrased it, like when she was old enough.
Yeah, but I don't really think they thought through
when that would be.
Right.
Because they were taken aback when she was like, yeah, I want to start exploring. They're like, now? We're not ready for you to explore.
And I wonder, I mean, this is totally me just inferring things that might not be true, but I mean, that's kind of like the experience of being a parent, of you think always that your child is like still a baby, and then all of a sudden you realize, like, oh my gosh, you are old enough for this.
Right? Are we having this conversation? Like, did you really just ask about this very, very big thing that I'm not ready to explain yet?
Yeah.
Yes, and I think that happens all through parenthood, where you really can't gauge at what point. But Margaret, she talks to God. She doesn't talk out loud because she doesn't want anyone to, I guess, hear her or think she's weird. So she talks without moving her lips, which could be in her head, I guess. I mean, that's what I'm kind of picturing.
Like prayer.
Yeah, it really is like she's praying to God, but it's a conversation. And on the first day of school, her teacher asked everybody about their likes and dislikes, and she includes religious holidays as a dislike. And he finds that interesting, in which she's mortified by, because basically Nancy told her that he's really trying to figure out who the weirdos are. And so she's afraid that he thinks she's weird.
Yes. Once again, Nancy as a symbol for all problems at that age. Yes.
Anything that can bring you anxiety, Nancy probably did it. So he has that question and asks her what she meant by that. So she basically is like, well, yes, I wasn't raised as any particular thing, so I don't feel like I fit in with any, none of the holidays feel like they fit kind of thing. But that's when she decides he also has this project, this year-long school project, where they explore something, and she decides to explore religion.
Yeah.
So she does go to different church functions.
She goes to Rosh Hashanah with her grandmother,
who was so excited and now called her little Jewish girl. And she's like, wait, back the truck up, Grandma. This is not what's happening.
Yeah.
I'm exploring all things.
Yeah.
And again, her mom and dad were a little bit like, really? This is what you want to do? But they were supportive. They bought her gloves for her church outfit. She goes to a service with a friend, and she's like, it's the same kind of thing. There's some talk, there's some verses, and, the person stands up and talks for a while. And that's it. And she really didn't have any kind of feeling, not the same kind of feeling she has when she has her one-on-one conversations.
Yeah. And she says, I don't know why I only feel you when I'm by myself. Oh my gosh, I'm going to start crying. I cry so easily. But yeah, she says, I can only feel God when I'm by myself. And I'm like, I relate to that as well.
And, I feel like I've had similar experiences where I was in these beautiful cathedrals that are supposed to have you feel a certain way.
Yeah.
And it didn't necessarily do that. But then one of my favorite places I've been is the Painted Desert. Yeah. And I looked at it and I'm like, whew, okay. This is just like beautiful and, a divine being clearly was in charge of this.
Yeah.
So I think that there is definitely that expectation that you feel God in certain places, and that's not necessarily the times that you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, once again, she does such a good job of conveying things that are...
Absolutely.
I also, rereading it, so I've reread it as an adult a few years ago, and then I read it with Annabelle about a year and a half ago, and then we saw the movie.
Audrey and I also saw the movie, and she loved it.
Mm-hmm. It is, it's like one of those ones is I was so nervous when it was coming out. I was like, are you guys going to mess this up? Yeah. But no, it was beautiful, and we saw it. And of course, Annabelle, who is not like me with the crying, she looks over, and I'm just sobbing in the first 5 minutes. And she's just like, what is wrong with you? Pull it together.
Pull it together, Mom.
And I'm like, this is
people are looking at us. You're making a scene. So I have my theory, because I guess Judy Blume for a long time did not want to adapt it. Mm-hmm. And I have a feeling, because in the documentary, she does talk about, she reminds herself all the time of how old she is. Mm. And I think she was like, you know what? It's going to be adapted at some point. And I want to be involved. That's my... I'm totally projecting, but she was involved. And I think that shows, because adaptations, they can go either way. And you're right. It's so hard when you love a book and then you watch the movie and it's just not it.
Yeah.
But they did a good job.
They did a wonderful job. I thought it was so beautiful. And Kathy Bates as Grandma. And then Rachel McAdams as the mom. And I like that they had Rachel McAdams have the mother, Barbara, had her own storyline, which you don't really see in the book because it's from Margaret's point of view. But my take on that is so many of the people who are invested in this story are now mothers. And so, and we can relate. And so it's sort of, and it wasn't a major plot point, but you can definitely see her struggle of, I'm moving to the suburbs and who am I now? And it's sort of that I hate the word midlife crisis, because I don't think we all have crisis, but I think we all have a moment of coming to terms with your life and your mortality, and what are you going to do for the next 40 years, right? I've already got 40 under my belt. What am I going to do for the next one?
I agree. It's not a crisis. It's more of an understanding of ourselves, what we've done so far, what we thought maybe that we were going to do.
Yeah.
When I was younger, I thought maybe I would do all these things. And where am I on my list? Like, what have I really done at this point?
Yeah.
And, what impact do I still want to make?
Exactly. Yeah.
So let's talk about the book a little bit. And I've got some, librarian here.
Okay.
Got some stats for you.
I love this. Okay. I did not know we had the stats. I'm ready.
Some research.
Okay.
So it was published in 1970.
Mm-hmm.
And that year, it was New York Times Outstanding Book of the Year. In 2010, Time announced it or put it in its all-time 100 novels. Mm-hmm. And Scholastic includes it on 100 greatest books for kids. So that's just, not Judy Blume, but just Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. Mm-hmm. Flip side.
Okay.
It's been on ALA's 100 most challenged books in the 1990s. So for the whole decade of the 1990s, it was in the top 100 of the 1990s and in the 2000s. But then it dropped from the list. And we as librarians know which books kind of replaced it. So they weren't worried about religion anymore or mentioning a period. Oh, my God. We now have other
people that we're worried about.
People that we're worried about. Anything that's different. And I don't want to take us there necessarily. But Judy Blume, we can't talk about her without talking about her involvement in banned books and how her approach, which you got to watch the documentary. I just watched it last night. I'm admitting.
Okay.
I just watched it last night, so it's all very fresh. Again, I cried a couple times.
All right.
She was caught, it was the crossfire, and she just didn't have any clue that she would be attacked like she was on that show. And she tried to justify, and how she talks about it is, she was trying to reason. And that obviously it just wasn't working that way. So her approach, she kind of changed her tactic and approach to be more like, I can't reason with people who basically can't reason with. And I hate to say that in that way, but the reasons why her books are challenged is just kind of absurd. Yeah. Then instead, she was really fighting for the right to read and the access to books. Yeah. And I wholeheartedly agree with the concept that I'm a parent. I take the same approach that thankfully my mom did, which was read what you want to read kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But I'm not going to choose what other parents or what other kids can read. Right. As a parent, Yeah. And I don't want to, you can edit this out if you want to, because I don't want to take us down that road, but I think it's important when we're talking about Judy Blume because she is so loved. So we're talking about her books overall, over 75 million copies of her books are sold, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's sold. We're not even talking about borrowed from the library, borrowed from a friend. We're not talking about how many of our books are read. Now, 9 million of those were Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. So she has a tight hold on that number.
Yeah. And this is, if you're not a Judy Blume fan, you've never read anything, this is the seminal Judy Blume.
It is her most popular book. Mm-hmm. But there are other books that are right up there with it. Yeah. But with that being said, if you think about how many books are sold, she's still an author that people are reading. We're talking about this book being 54 years old, right? Written in 1970. Yeah. Did I do my math right?
You did.
I did. Mm-hmm. And yet, it's still relatable.
It's so
54 years later. How many books are relatable after 54 years?
Yeah. No, when I've reread this book, that was one thing, because it's, once again, rereading books from your childhood as an adult. You're like, sometimes it's not good.
No, it's not.
But this is one that, it stands up. You can read this as an adult and get a lot from it. Read it with your child. It's really beautiful.
It is. And I didn't read the Fudge ones.
I read Fudge and Super Fudge, and they were so funny. They spoke to me. I remember things as a child. I can't quote anything off the top of my head, but she would say things in them, and I was like, 100% Judy. As a 9-year-old, I was like, she knows. This lady knows. And I have to tell you, you talked about when you fell in love with reading in libraries with Babysitter's Club. For me, it was her book starring Sally J. Friedman as herself. Did you read that one?
I did not.
So that one is actually It's almost like she said it's not her autobiography, but it has a lot of her childhood. She did move to Florida, I think, because her brother was sick.
Yes, for like a few years, right?
Yeah, I don't remember exactly how long, but the book takes place across the year, and her brother gets sick, so they move to Florida, and it's right after World War II, so the book is opening up with the announcement that, I guess it's, V-Day. It's opening up with that scene. It's also sort of a coming-of-age story. I read that so many times, and I got it from the library. I have this memory of sitting in my hometown library next to the window reading that book over and over and over again, and how relatable it was to me as a young girl, as the same age as Sally. Yeah. So, but anyway, like you're saying, it's so relatable through time, and just the way that she understands children, young adult, and that's the magic of her.
So in a few interviews, I kind of looked at those, and then also in the documentary, which I think that some of the things I read, like, just pulled from the documentary, to be honest. She talks about the book Forever and the reason why she wrote it. Have you actually heard that story?
No, I have read Forever, but I don't know the story.
So her daughter was like, hey, why isn't there like a book out there where, two teenagers have sex, but one of them's not punished for it? It's like they don't die or get pregnant or have something horrible. They just have like responsible sex. She's like, I don't know. There should be. Let me write it.
Yeah.
And I think about, and of course that book is challenged as well.
They all are.
So I don't know that the fudge books are. That they showed up on the list. I don't know.
We need to reread or read Fudge and find out.
And see. He doesn't drop the F-bomb, I don't think.
Yeah.
Which is like why people don't, like the Rachel Robinson.
Yeah, here's to you, Rachel Robinson.
Yeah. You can't drop the F-bomb in a book. And she talked about that too. She's like, meanwhile in the playground, they're dropping the F-bombs all the time.
Well, and also like the reality of childhood, I feel like, and I think childhood is a beautiful time. I'm not trying to take away from it, but I think sometimes people like want to sterilize it a little bit and think that children don't know things at a certain age. And I mean, even in Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, they have the sex class in 6th grade. And she comments, why did they wait till 6th grade to explain us? We know everything already by the time they explained it to us. And yeah, so I've thought about that so much my whole life. I had definitely the experience of people not realizing how much I knew. I was very curious about what sex was. So I remember like going into a Barnes & Noble, and this is, at this point I should have just known I was going to be a librarian. I figured out where that section was. And I went and I found a book, and it had pictures, not like graphic pictures, but just explaining what it was. And I think I was probably like 9 or 10, at my daughter's age now.
We had the Charlie Brown encyclopedias, and it had the Peanuts characters, right? But my cousin and I, my cousin is 3 years older than me, my brother's 2 years older than me, and then I'm the youngest. We're all huddled around the encyclopedia looking at that part of it. It didn't really explain much or whatever, but it did show anatomy. There did have a section where it showed the human body, you know? It wasn't too, it's Charlie Brown. It wasn't too graphic.
Yeah.
But, kids are curious.
Friends say things to them. They have older brothers and sisters who tell them things.
Like, it's not that my mom, it's not that she didn't want me to know things, but my mom was not one that I talked to about, like, she didn't really talk to me about puberty or anything. I think she just didn't know how to broach the subject. And I feel like I've just tried to be very open and honest as a parent, as my children, and I have a 17-year-old and a 12-year-old, as they were growing up, and kind of being like, you could come to me with anything, talk to me about anything. But I also feel like I don't want them to get the wrong information from the grapevine. I'd rather them ask me the questions, and I'm not going to go into graphic detail or anything, but, I just don't want them to
scare them.
No, but I do know, and going back to the book, I could relate to the whole like wanting to get my period.
Mm-hmm.
My mom and I didn't talk about that. And then I did. And I'm like, crap, I have to tell my mom I got my period. And I'm like, hey, Mom, guess what?
Huh?
And because she didn't really talk about it with me up until that. I wasn't like scared by it.
Yeah.
But then it's funny because I think we are all, well, I'm projecting here, but those of us that really, really wanted it, and then it came, and then we're like, "What the crap?
This is horrible.
Why on earth would we want this?"
My mom did talk, like, I remember, but I also, by the time we had talked about it, like, I had read this book already, too,
Mm-hmm.
and I wanted to, like, first of all, thank you to my mother, because she listens to this, and she did talk to me about, prepared me for it, but also, this book also normalized it for me a little bit, so by the time it happened, I was like, guess what, Mom and Dad? And my dad is
no longer your little girl.
Yeah, I don't really remember a lot of their reaction at all at the time, but it was fine. Yeah.
Yeah. And my mom was fine too.
Yeah.
I just had much more anxiety than I feel like maybe I should have, because it wasn't. And in preparing for, as a parent, when the pediatrician, because the pediatrician will kind of talk to you about it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel like that was the case when we were growing up. It wasn't. No.
That,
yeah. But now it is. They say, these are the things that we're watching for, and they had, the pediatrician had a window, like it's going to happen in the next year or two, and kind of. I'm glad that part is so much more like, just like a lot of things that were taboo at various times in history. I do feel like we've openly talked about. I mean, I feel like a lot of things relating to anything female is taboo. Getting your period, having a miscarriage.
I'll talk about it.
Yeah. And I'm like, I'm going to talk about it if I damn well want to talk about it. Other people have experienced these same things. I think it's important. Depression, mental health things.
Right.
And I think we've come a long way in that. But that's one of the things that I can relate to.
Yeah.
The not talking about it part.
Yeah. I have a funny story, and I'll tell it to you. But anyway, it's my daughter, Annabelle, and this is probably like 3 or 4 years ago. She is 5 or 6 at the time of this. And this is why I say you can't protect your child from like every little thing, because they're going to hear it from somewhere. We had a babysitter for a little bit. Not our current babysitter, who is an adult and is wonderful and would never. Anyway, I didn't really care that much about what happened in the story, but this babysitter would share a lot with Annabelle, who, like I said, was like 5 or 6 at the time.
Like chat with her like a friend?
Yeah. And like Annabelle one day was like, oh, well, she was, they must have been playing games because she said he got mad at her for cheating. And I was, oh my gosh, okay. And then one day,
I love in her brain she had to make sense of that. What is cheating? I guess they were playing a game.
That's what she said. And so I guess one day the babysitter told Annabelle that she was on her period and it really like sucked, and like was upset. So then babysitter explains. Like, I didn't have the conversation with her. The babysitter told, and I have to say this person was like 14 or 15 years old. So I can't hold them to too high of a standard. But anyway, so I'm like, okay, well, now she knows about that. That's fine. And we're at dinner with my friend Kara, who was episode 2.
Yeah, she was on the show. I loved her episode, Kara, if you're listening.
Yeah, so Kara and I, and our daughters are very close. So her daughter is just a year younger than Annabelle. And we're sitting there having dinner like, a week or 2 after the babysitter. And Annabelle goes to her daughter and she's like, so, do you know what a period is?
Oh my God.
And I'm not talking about the end of a sentence. We're like at dinner, and I was like, thank God it was Kara, because not like some other parents freaking out, because, Kara was like, where'd you hear about that, sweetie? Anyway, so, yeah, that's my little story of how my daughter found out about it.
Well, I think that's the thing. Like, I do think that kids talk all the time. And I'm not trying to say that parents shouldn't monitor what their kids are doing and reading and whatever.
You should.
But your child's heard about it. I guarantee you, whatever you're worried about them reading in a book, they've heard about it.
They've heard much worse.
It's not coming from a book.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to do something a little different.
Okay.
And we're like having so much fun. So I found a quiz online. No. You and I were going to do it together.
Okay. The quiz on how well did you read the book? Because
how well do you know Judy Blume quiz?
Oh, so
we're going to do it together.
Okay, we'll do it together.
Okay. What is Deanie diagnosed with in Judy Blume's novel of the same name? What do you got?
Scoliosis.
Let's see. Reveal. Correct.
Woo.
Why has the novel, I guess this is the Deanie book.
Okay.
Why has the novel been repeatedly banned in schools in America?
Masturbation.
Oh, I don't even have to read it. There's like other options. Devil worship, foul, inappropriate language. All right. I don't know if I know this one. What does Michael call his penis in Blume's novel Forever?
It was in the documentary.
All right, I'll give you the options. Michael, Willie, Ralph.
It's Ralph.
Okay. Ding, ding, ding. Man, we're crushing this. We're crushing it.
I was like, man, I just watched the documentary where they talked about it.
Okay. All right. My biggest problem is my brother Farley Drexel Hatchell. He's 2.5 years old. What is Peter's brother nickname in Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing?
Fudge?
Yeah, it is. Options are Fudge, FD, Dribble, or Drex. It's Fudge.
Okay.
We both know this. Yes. All right. Question 5. What was Blume's first published book? Are you there? God, it's me, Margaret. The one in the middle is The Green Kangaroo, otherwise known as Sheila the Great, or The Pain and the Great One. Do you have any idea?
The second one, the
one in the middle?
The one in the middle.
Is The Green Kangaroo. That's right. What topic does Blume's novel, Iggy's House, see her tomboy protagonist?
And I don't know the answer.
I do, but I'll read them out. Homosexuality, abortion, racism, or religion. Do you know? Iggy's House is about a black family that moves into a white neighborhood. Okay. Yeah, so it's racism.
Mm-hmm. No, it wasn't homosexuality. She really hasn't dealt with that aspect.
No, I don't think she has. What was Blume's first novel for adult readers? Wifey, Summer Sisters, In the Unlikely Event, or Freckle Juice?
Well, we know it's not Freckle Juice.
We can eliminate that.
I think it was Wifey.
It was Wifey, I'm pretty sure. Yep.
And that was really pulling from her own experience.
Okay.
Again, you got to watch that documentary. So Sam and Audrey had a little daddy-daughter date and went to see Despicable Me 4. Okay. And I was like, I think I'm going to bail on that and watch the documentary.
Okay.
And I'm glad I did.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds wonderful. Bill Howard doesn't know this yet, but his night is now dedicated to this documentary. But don't worry, I'll let him have some blue GigiRitas while we watch it.
You know, I think that the whole experience would be elevated with blue GigiRitas.
Yes.
So,
yeah, I think all experience was there. Okay, we've got 2 more questions.
All right.
Which of Blume's novels tackles bullying?
Blubber,
yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Why has Blume said she set out to write forever? And actually, you already said this, so I'll just go ahead and read it. Because her daughter asked her to write a story about 2 nice kids who have sex without retribution. Mm-hmm. Good job. Okay. And what is Margaret desperate to grow? And are you there, God? It's me, Margaret.
Her boobs!
Oh my gosh. We got 10 out of 10.
Yay!
Brilliant. You are almost alarmingly close in touch with your inner child reader.
I am in touch with my inner child reader. I know one of the questions you ask is about the genre. I can't remember who it was that you asked them. They talked about children's book, and then they're like, no way. Like, that's not what I read. But I do. I love coming-of-age stories. Part of that, too, is that I do have a 17-year-old and a 12-year-old, and for the last, I don't know, decade, I have been reading with them. Mm-hmm. It wasn't until recently that they both were like, okay, I'm kind of done with this part, you know, which is fine. But so I've had a chance to read a lot of that kind of book. But even aside from that, there's some really good ones that have come out in the last few years that are just so. Now I'm not going to get the names right, but Libration Nation. Here are some of my favorite coming of age stories: The Incredible Journey of Coyote Sunrise.
I knew you were going to say that one.
Such a good one. And the second book just came out, and Audrey and I are planning on reading it together. The Life of a Cactus. What is it? What's the rest of it? So the insignificant events in the life of a cactus, and that is about a girl who was born with no arm but can do everything. But there's just some great, really coming of age stories. So even though I am in my mid-40s, I admit that a good coming of age story kind of brings me back to what it feels like to be young. It reminds me of all the things that we worried about, those middle grade reader kind of things. They're probably some of my favorite, aside from adult fiction, with some nonfiction.
Yeah.
So.
Well, thank you for sharing that. That's really beautiful. If you don't mind, I was just thinking a couple that Annabelle has really enjoyed
Absolutely.
too. So Wonder, they read it in school last year and she loved it and wanted to go see the movie. El Defo, which is also... El Defo is another one of her favorites. And then, it's not a book. It's not a book, but it's a movie that just came out. I think it's called If.
Oh, I haven't watched that yet.
Yeah. It's really good. We watched it as a family, and I mean, she was very touched, and it's growing up, and it's about your invisible, imaginary friends.
Yeah.
So those are some of the ones I like.
So I feel like I should mention the other one because I talked about possibly doing it on the episode, but then I was like, it's really hard to pair a drink with a juvenile book.
Well, we did it.
Did it anyway. And that one was Fish in a Tree. And that one is about a girl who is struggling with dyslexia, but she has not been diagnosed yet.
Oh.
And we read that one right after Audrey was diagnosed. And it was really, that one really hit a little too close to home, I feel like, but it was really good. And I highly recommend that one to anybody who, as a parent-child, read if you're going through that kind of thing.
Okay.
The teacher is the one that recognizes what's happening, and the teacher is the one that talks about all the famous people that had dyslexia.
Yeah.
And they think, that even Einstein had dyslexia.
It's very common. Yeah. And they think about how smart you have to be to have that barrier and just keep going. Yeah.
And it's just a different kind of, there's a whole bunch of brain science and other things around it. It was a really good book.
Yeah. Well, good. We've sort of...
Yeah, we jumped all over.
Yeah, I knew with coming to this book that it's so close to me that it's hard for me to just sit and ask questions. I'm just going to jump in. So, but is there anything that we didn't get to that you would like to talk on?
Oh, I know what I want to talk about.
Okay.
I want to talk about Laura.
Yes.
I feel like
100%. We have to talk about Laura. Yeah.
So when I was reading this book, Laura didn't stick out to me.
When you were a child.
Yeah, when I was a child. Okay. I didn't think about Laura.
Who is Laura?
So Laura Denker, she is in Margaret's class, and she started wearing a bra when she was in 4th grade.
Yeah.
So she's been developing for a while. And so much so, and she's also the tallest. So she's taller than every boy and developed. So much so that when Margaret first goes in the classroom, she thinks she's the teacher. That's how much older she feels like she looks. But poor Laura has rumors spread about her. Thank you, Nancy Wheeler, who is the...
She's the villain of the book.
The villain.
I mean, she's accidental villain, and I think she's 12, and so we give her grace.
Yes, we'll give her grace, but she does spread rumors. She spreads the rumor that Laura went behind
the A&P. Shout out to the 80s.
Yes,
and the
right.
70s or whatever.
Whenever that was still a grocery store when I was.
There was one when I was 4 or 5, and then it was gone.
I don't know at what point it went away, but yes. So she was behind the grocery store with Moose and Evan, and Evan being Nancy's older brother. So, of course, Margaret believes it because she thinks that Evan told Nancy, and she makes the comment to Laura, and Laura's like, I can't believe you would believe everything you hear. But they treat her like an outcast.
Yeah.
And the boys are like enamored by her because she, of course, has boobs.
Mm-hmm.
And, boys at that age obsessed with. Everybody's obsessed with boobs at that age, right?
It seems like the whole...
The girls are because they want them. The boys are because they're like, whoa, boobs. So the boys are all like, oh my gosh, they think she's... But they won't talk to her. They're too afraid to talk to her.
Mm-hmm.
And then the girls think that they shouldn't hang around with her because she has a bad reputation. And so she's just pretty much like isolated. It's so very sad.
Yeah.
And there was in my middle school, there was definitely someone that I would put in that same category. She had friends. She definitely had friends. But I do know that things were spread about her. But I was smart enough, and not to toot my own horn because I wasn't smart enough in a lot of other ways. But I was like, I doubt that's true. Like, really? Do I think that happened? I do think that when I read it the first time, I could relate so much to Margaret. It didn't really occur to me what was going on with Laura. And I just want to give a shout out to all the Lauras out there. I feel like you had it much worse. I feel like those of us who thought we were late bloomers, eventually we bloomed. We didn't have to worry about, and as an adult reading that, so this was one of those books that at different ages had like a book that kind of just spoke to me and hit me. Watching the documentary though, I was like, well, who am I? Millions of people have it in their all-time favorites. It's just that kind of book that spoke to people, and that still speaks to people.
Who's the story for?
I think we kind of touched on that. It was written 54 years ago, and yet I would still recommend it to a teenager. And I'm gonna be honest, in the documentary, all sexes were reading that. I tended to go to myself with a female protagonist, and Audrey prefers a female protagonist.
Yeah.
Micah prefers a male protagonist. But I feel like you can relate across the board that there's not a need for it to be, any kind of gender part to that. But I do think, in fact, so in the documentary, they read through the letters, and one of the people had written to Judy for years, but she says something about she doesn't think boys should read the book. And Judy's like, oh no, I think that everybody should understand and see what it, be able to kind of see what the experience is.
Yeah.
So 100% agree with that. The other thing from that documentary that I want to say about Judy Blume, well, one, God, I wish as a child I realized that I could write to her. There are people that she wrote back and forth with for years. And in the documentary, there is one pretty heavy thing that happened to one of the people. And I'm just like, wow, Judy Blume not only was writing these books and all of that, but she also was almost like a little therapist.
Yeah.
To have that kind of weight on her.
Yeah.
That many people looking to her. And she even says, I was not trained, whatever. And she does try to refer people and say, you really should speak to someone about this and talk to people about this. But people were using her as a therapist because, she just was so approachable.
Right. She is. And I think her writing has such an impact. But like you said, she's just a regular person. I think she was a mom when she started writing, and she was just like, I'm just going to try this. And then it was working. Yeah. Her spirit speaks to so many of us and is what is so beautiful. And anyway, but I think that's a good point that I don't know if Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret is for men, but I feel like they can get an understanding of that experience by reading it.
Absolutely. It's the whole thing, right? The window and the mirror. So the mirror is when you read the book and you can relate so much to the character.
Yeah.
Obviously, for us, when we read it, we were definitely looking in a mirror and we're like, oh, she's so relatable. But it's just equally important to be able to look through the window and see someone else's experience.
Yeah.
In that regard, I feel like it's a great read.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you.
Yes, having me on. I hope again, iconic book, and then one of the world's most influential people that we're talking about. And, my experience, I think, mirrors a lot of people's experience.
Oh, yeah.
So, but I hope I gave the book justice.
I think you did, and I appreciate, me also being like, this is my favorite book. So, like, I was just as eager as you were to talk about it.
Yes. And then, for all you in Libration Nation, no matter what your age, if you haven't read it,
yeah, definitely.
It's a quick read.
You can get the audiobook. You can put it on 1.25. You can get through it in like 2.5 hours.
Yeah, you can get it on your phone and put the typeface up.
That nice big font. Yeah.
Which is exactly what I did.
Yeah. Yes. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I want you to thank for coming on here, being my friend for all these years, my fellow librarian, and all these things. So, and this was another wonderful experience we've had together.
Yes.
Thank you for spending some time with me and my guest for an episode of Drinks in the Library. For more information about the show, you can find us on Instagram at Drinks in the Library, on the World Wide Web, drinksinthelibrary.com, or shoot me an email at drinkspod@gmail.com. Until next time, cheers.